Hey there, nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back on the episode of Beast Mode. This series is dedicated to the building, painting, as well as designing of our studio's 3,000 point Beastmen Brayherd Army for our games of Warhammer: The Old World. And this is episode number 3, and we are coming back alive and talking about exactly the progress that we've made since the last time we've done one of these videos. As you can see, I actually have a significant portion of the army fully completed. It looks absolutely fantastic. We're going to talk about some of the elements that are involved in this latest stage of our painting of this army with this phase. We'll also about exactly what our design concepts were about and what our overall goals are. And then, of course, we'll talk about the next steps for building this project. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So the last time that we actually came into this video series, I actually had a couple of things painted. The first thing I painted, of course, were these 3 Raptorexes from Warcry, as well as these 3 Raptorexes over here. Those 6 will actually be, I can use them either as Chaos Warhounds or as Razor Gore for this army. I'm using them as a proxy for that as well. I also talked about this unit of 10 Bestigor, which looks quite larger now because I have some unit fillers in there. We'll talk about exactly what that entails. Same thing with this unit of 20 Gore. I painted those guys up as well as a unit filler for that one. And at the same time, I also painted these 6 Furies from Warcry as well, which I'll be using as Harpies for my games of Warhammer with the Old World for this army. Now, some of the additions that I made, of course, is this honking unit right over here. This is a unit of 20 Ungor. So these guys are all armed with bows and arrows, and this unit was recently completed. That's my most recent one that I've had. Same thing with this Chaos Spawn inside this unit over here, as well as this Chaos Spawn in this unit as well. And same thing with the Endless Spell. I have 3 flocks of like Raven Crow looking things. I have a large horn looking thing over here, as well as this giant Blazing Bull looking thing back over there. So those are the latest additions to this army. So let's talk about exactly what I did. So first of all, let's talk about this Ungor unit. If you'll notice, this Ungor unit looks quite different from the rest of the units. And the reason why is because these guys, I decided to paint up using war paint. As you can see, these guys are just normal beastmen with flesh as well as fur coloring, but I also put in some shades of blue as well as turquoise as well as green for their war paint. As you can see, I got stripes and I have arms painted up and faces painted up. I got designs painted on their bodies as well. And when I was painting up this Ungor unit, this is when I realized I made a huge mistake with my overall painting because I should have done exactly the same thing for my Ungor. Unfortunately, I did not think of this idea until I was actually with my friends and family a little while ago. I was actually watching an old movie from the 90s called Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I don't know if you guys ever watched that movie. It stars Kevin Costner. He plays Robin Hood. It's got Morgan Freeman in it, Alan Rickman. It's a pretty interesting movie from the 90s. Well, in that film, the Sheriff of Nottingham, the main villain, spoiler alerts, actually hires Celts, which are basically barbaric peoples, tribal peoples from Great Britain, and he actually uses them as thugs to do one of the final battles in that movie. And in that film, these characters have this crazy-looking war paint that they wear with blue and green war paint. And I was watching that film and I realized that is a really cool look, and that is something I should definitely use for my Beastmen. And the reason why is because the Celts used to use a plant, what is called woad, I believe is how you call it. It's pronounced, it's spelled W-O-A-D. It's a plant that when the juices and the sap from it have like this greenish kind of bluish color. And ancient Celtish warriors living in Great Britain during the times of the Romans in ancient times would use this and paint themselves with it before battle and then charge into battle and, with that blue war paint. And I thought that would be like such a cool looking vibe to have for my Beastmen army, since Beastmen, are tied to the woods. They're kind of tribal. And I thought it looked really cool, and that's exactly what I did with these guys as well. So I used some green turquoise, I also used teal, I also used blue and green, well, holly branch green, to create this really cool painted effect for this unit as well, make it look like they have war paint as well. And I'm just really happy with the way they came out. I did the same thing with the bases on these guys as well, made it part of the bases that they use. I actually have a couple of guys whose bases came out a little too dark, and the reason why is because I painted those guys up, as well as some of the other characters here for Mordheim Warband. And I realized later now that I actually used too much mid-wax polyshaded acrylic on those guys. I didn't dilute it enough, so they came out a little bit darker than the rest of my army. But that's okay, hindsight's 2020. But I really like the way this war paint really came out for these guys. I'm kind of sad because now looking back, I wish I would have done this exact same war paint motif on my Gores. I think my Gores will look really, really cool with that look on them as well. But, oh well, Sylvie. Like I said, hindsight's 2020. So at least I have it now on my Ungors. So that way they look like they're like tribal and, ready to like raid and destroy and do all kinds of cool stuff. And so just like these guys here, I got these guys secondhand. There was a player who was playing a Beast of Chaos army. I was able to get a majority of these miniatures for 125 bucks. So I just had these guys. These guys are already painted up, not painted up, already carrying bows and arrows when I originally got them. And they're already mounted on these round bases as well. So I decided just to keep those round bases and just keep that overall look for them. So they look absolutely fantastic. Went with a green banner for these guys as opposed to the turquoise banner over here, as well as the teal banner over here, to give everybody like their own little unique kind of color for their banners. And I just really like the way this team kind of basically came out. Now, other things I also painted to are my unit fillers, which are my chaos spawn. So here's one of my chaos spawn over here. As you can see, mounted this guy on a round base as well. Just a really quick paint job for this guy. He's actually one of my unit fillers, using some browns and some, as well as some reds for some accent colors. I use a brown and teal spray paint to paint most of these guys to give this kind of zenithal kind of gradient look on their skin. I did exactly the same thing with this chaos spawn back over here as well. Now, both these chaos spawn will be unit fillers in my army. They'll represent 4 fighters apiece because their bases are 60mm bases. So they should be able to do that pretty easily. So I have those painted up. And then I also have these crazy looking raven looking things. I'm going to just pull this out real quick so you guys can see that. But yeah, I have 3 of these raven looking things from the Endless Spell that came with this purchase that I had. And I decided to use these guys as unit fillers as well. These guys represent 2 fighters apiece. So I have the flock of birds back over there as well. Very easy to paint. I just spray painted them brown with some zenithal highlighting with some teal. Did dry brushing with gray, picked out their beaks and their talons, some green paint for their eyes, and then oil wash them. Same thing with this horn looking thing, which is actually kind of cool. I got this ethereal paint job on the base there for like the little energy flames that are coming up to pick it up. Also picked out some of those runes in bright blue. And it's kind of neat because in the Warhammer the Old World, there's actually a rule called the Brayhorn, which the Beast Lords can actually trumpet basically to summon more fighters to them. And so the way I figured this is basically just the Brayhorn represented in this army unit right over here. This would be my general's unit. This army is not fully completed yet. I got another unit fill I want to put in here to make it look a little bit larger. So we still got some work to do with this unit. And then, of course, back over here, this huge Mongoso guy back here. Let me just grab him real quick so you guys can see him better. This is a blazing bull looking thing that was from Endless Spell as well. And what I'm going to use this for is for a Razor Gore Chariot is what I'm going to use this for. Because, this thing looks like it runs around, it rams things. It looks really cool as well. Just look really awesome. I was actually inspired by an old movie from the 80s called Legend. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that film or if you guys are any fantasy buffs from the 80s. It starred Tom Cruise. I forgot the actress's name. She was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Tim Curry played the devil in that movie, played a guy called Dark Lord. Well, anyways, in that film, in the very opening sequence of that film, they actually show Tim Curry's character, the Dark Lord, and he's got this, black light effect going on. His skin looks kind of blue, even though the character is, supposed to be bright red. His skin's, bright blue, and it's glowing. He's got glowing green eyes in that sequence, and I thought that was kind of inspiring, so I decided to use that as the inspiration to paint this guy. So I made this guy kind of like this shadowy, glowing blue color for his flesh, and then I used this kind of ethereal, glow-in-the-dark looking green flame that I use from my undead armies that I actually use for my things like my dire wolves as well as for my undead. So those of you guys who watch these videos, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I decided to use that for the flame effects to make it look like it's preternatural and supernatural and magical. I plan on actually using this guy as a chariot for my Great Bray Shaman, which is this guy back here. My plan actually is to mount this guy here in the back, make it look like he's actually riding this chariot as well, so that way he has 360-degree field of vision when he's using his spells, and at the same time he also adds additional wounds to him as well to make it a little bit more survivable in combat, which is a nice little bonus there, so I think that looks really, really cool with that one. Plus he has a little bit more punching power in the charge. So that's pretty much how I plan on using that guy in this army, is by having him ride a Razor Gore Chariot. And that's pretty much what my plan is. So pretty good for it took me about a week to get to this point. I did all the other spells, the Chaos Spawn, as well as the Ungor. So not bad for a week's work. So with this being said, all of my core requirements are now done for my army. All I have to do now is just concentrate on my special and rare choices. And that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about what my next step is for this army. So my next step is to work on these 6 Dragon Ogres next. So that's what I'm going to work on next. So I'm working on my special as well as rare choices. And the reason why I'm working on these Dragon Ogres first is because these Dragon Ogres were already assembled already. I bought this when I bought my army. So I did this where I just primed them ready right now, some flat red primer real quick, so that way I can start painting these guys up for my army. And I'm actually going to do these guys a little bit differently than you see normally for Dragon Ogres. Usually people paint up their Dragon Ogres in like a green kind of color for the dragon portion of them. However, I was really taken by the bright red color schemes that Games Workshop used to do back in the olden days with Heavy Metal, with the classic dragon ogres back when they used to be pewter. So I'm going to actually try to go for a red paint job on these guys. So I'm going to have their hindquarters be red, and then of course normal ogre tops on the top, just so that way that red kind of contrasts nicely with all of the turquoise and teal that we're seeing throughout the army. I really like the way that my harpies kind of contrast nicely with the rest of the army. Their bases kind of make them match with the rest of the army, but they're kind of like their own unit. I want to try to do exactly that same effect on my dragon ogres, so that way they're kind of like their own little unit as well. So that's what I'll be working on next. I'll probably have to spend a whole period of time just painting these 6 guys by themselves. Now, meanwhile, over here on the side, as you can see, I have my other projects. My round bases finally came in from Amazon. So as you can see, I have my own converted Minotaurs I have back there that I made from some Reaper miniatures, as well as some Games Workshop stuff. I did get 2 Minotaurs, as well as a Doom Bull from the guy that I purchased my materials from. So I will be using those for most of my Minotaurs, but I converted the rest using some Reaper miniatures, as well as some leftover sprue from the Minotaurs to do that. There's my round bases there. So I'm going to do that to make those guys. I got to convert those guys a little bit more and then glue them to those bases and get them textured and things. And then once I get done with my Minotaurs, the next thing I work on are my rare choices, which are my Cygor, which I'm going to use this Brayherd stone for, because Cygor are supposed to be able to throw these huge boulders, and you know, it just looks like something like that. It looks like this thing is possessed. I also have a Chaos Giant over here I got to paint up as well, so that'll be another one of my projects I'll be working on. And then I also got a Cygor. I don't not a Cygor, a Gorgon. Unfortunately, my Gorgon's not on the table. It's actually stored away for right now. I was just too lazy to go get it. So those will be the last few projects that I have left, and then I will be done. So needless to say, my army is about halfway completed, and I'm really super excited about that. The only things I got to paint now are some monstrous cavalry, monstrous infantry, as well as some behemoths, and this army will be fully completed, and I can start playing it at 3,000 points on the tabletop. So like I said before, if you're ever going to be one of those kind of players who wants to paint up your army first before you play it, always start off with your core choices first, so that way you can immediately start playing with your army, because that's going to be the one thing that's going to be required. I mean, after all, I could actually play around 2,000 points just right off the bat right now. What I have enough core for my Bestigor, as well as for my Gors, Ungor, as well as my Razor Gors, as well as my Harpies, as well as a Chariot. So I have some characters in here. I could actually start playing at 2,000 points with just what I have right here, right off the bat. So that part would be kind of cool to do that if I wanted to. So that's another example of that. So like I said before, the next thing I'm going to focus on next are these Dragon Ogres, and that's what I'll be focusing on in the near future. All right, you guys, so there you have it. These are my plans for my Beastmen army for Beast Mode. So as you can see, I made a lot of progress so far. Really happy the way that this end result is coming out. I'm loving the way these guys are looking. I'm loving all the earth tones, as well as the teals, the greens, and the blues that we have in this army. It looks really, really awesome on the tabletop. It looks like it really pops. I do have to make some Luma trays for this army, of course, because these guys are mounted on round bases, but that's not going to be a bad problem. It's going to use some spare cardboard as well as some foam board to make some craft foam to make my movement trays, and then I'll just put these guys on there and have them, you know, fight on the battlefield, which will be kind of cool to see that happen on the tabletop. So I'm really happy with the way these guys are coming out. I can't wait to finish this army so that way I can start throwing some dice in the old world. So that's good for this week, guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.